Hello everybody, and welcome to the latest video in my series in which I look at the real-world history behind the Samurai Warriors franchise. I have a really great battle to share with you and talk with you about this week. It's the Battle of Okezahama. Okezahama is notable for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was the first major battle of the Sengoku period. It's the first time that one of the warlords of Japan thought that they were in a good enough position to actually march on Kyoto and try and take control of the emperor, which is important for reasons I'll get to in a moment. It was also a really interesting battle because it was the first time that Nobunaga Oda participated in a major battle. Oda is effectively Japan's Napoleon. That's probably the best way to describe him. He was a bit of a tyrant, but he was also an incredible tactician and an incredible leader, and he was able to effectively take control of almost all of Japan. Unfortunately, he was betrayed and killed before he could complete that, but he trained the next generation of leaders under him particularly well, left them in a strong position, and they were able to pick up where he left off and actually do what he was not able to, take control of Japan and bring the Sengoku period to a close. So that's how important Oda is, probably the most important person within the Sengoku period, the single most important person. So I thought it was a good time to kind of talk to him about him, third video into this series. So in the map here, I'm showing you where the Oda lands were before Okezahama actually happened. They had a very central position in Japan. They were close to Kyoto, and they were wealthy enough. They had enough land to be a major family, but they weren't quite in a position yet. They were able to entertain ambitions of conquest. They only had about 5,000 soldiers in their entire force, and it was, they were wealthy without being overly powerful. Kyoto is located in near the lake that you see there in the middle left of the map. The Imagawa, who were the people that led the attack which led to Okezahama, the Imagawa are at the bottom just to the right of the cursor there. They have the comb-shaped logo as their flag. They rose up a force of 20,000 odd soldiers, which was a huge force at the time. They were a very wealthy, very powerful clan at the time when the Sengoku period started. And with that force, they arrogantly assumed that they had just the raw numbers to lead an attack on Kyoto. The reason that you need to attack Kyoto, if you're a leader in Japan back in those days, was whoever controlled the emperor effectively had control of Japan. The emperor was very symbolically powerful because, of course, he's the emperor. It's like the king in other countries. But at the time of the Sengoku period, he was very politically weak. He didn't have much support internally, so he was just a symbolic figurehead. Really, all the power was being driven by the people with the soldiers, which were the warlords, like Imagawa and Oda. So they were all, they all had ambitions to march on Kyoto and take control of the emperor and then take control of Japan from there. The first one to have the force to really kind of do that, to play their hand, was the Imagawa. In addition to having 20,000 odd soldiers of their own, the Imagawa had a couple of really powerful benefits, or really kind of powerful strategic positions which they were also hoping to leverage. The first was that they had a really strong alliance with two other incredibly powerful families at the time. They had an alliance with the Takeda just north of them. Shingen Takeda was by far the most powerful single warrior at the point in time. They also had an alliance with the Hojo just to the east of them, which meant that they could go on the march and not be worried about being attacked from behind while their foot soldiers were out and about. So really, the only thing standing between Imagawa and Kyoto was the Oda, with their tiny force of 5,000 soldiers. Now, at that point in time in history, guns weren't even a big part of Japanese warfare. It was all very swords and bows and arrows and stuff like that. And the skill of the samurai kind of determined a lot of what happened in these battles, because they tended to be small in number. So to have a 4-to-1 advantage, as the Imagawa did, was just an incredible advantage. And nobody would have put their bets on the Oda actually winning a battle that way. And on top of that, the Imagawa had an incredibly talented young samurai general who was also an incredible leader at the time, Masudaira Motoyasu. Now, I probably pronounced his name poorly, and I apologize for that. His name won't be familiar to you probably if you heard it right anyway, because he gave it up fairly soon. He changed his name to Ieyasu Tokugawa, who obviously became the guy to end the Sengoku period. At the start, in this battle, he was compelled to fight with the Imagawa. because of the alliance that they had, and they had a lot of control and power over him. So he did. This was one of the only times, I think the only time actually, he fought against Oda in a conflict. He became a very close ally to Oda after that. So yes, Imagawa was marching on the capital, and they had protection from behind from their allies. They had a great samurai general on their side. But unfortunately for them, the overall force was led by a man by the name of Yoshimoto. Yoshimoto Imagawa was an incredibly poor military leader. He was a great man in other ways. He was a huge patron of the arts. He was a very cultured man. He was a very intelligent man. He did great things for his own country, his own land, and the people really loved him. He brought a great quality of life to his people, and he obviously thought that he was a good leader for the entire country, and he had a huge force, but he didn't have any strategic genius behind that, and that really cost him, because he was up against the greatest strategic genius of the time. He, while he was on the march, he sent Ieyasu Tokugawa, or who would become Ieyasu Tokugawa, to capture a couple of really important but small castles. So he did that. The one great general he had in his force was actually split away from the body of the army to go and take relatively small strategic points of interest. Now, Oda realized that and left those basically alone. Wasn't particularly interested in. For Oda, he was mostly interested in actually cutting the head off the snake and dealing with Yoshimoto Imagawa. Now, the way that Oda did that was he waited for Imagawa to set up camp, and he did so in a very poor strategic place. Assuming that he had the numerical superiority to beat anything that was thrown at him, he actually set up in a very indefensible spot, because he wanted to watch some no plays and celebrate the victories that his general was having in taking those smaller castles. So yeah, he basically set up camp in a spot he shouldn't have. Nobunaga Oda, for his part, was quite aware of what was going on and set up some false camps around the place. And those false camps, they looked obviously real, but the effect, the reason that he set them up was to create confusion in the Imagawa forces camps. They weren't quite sure where the enemy was, what was going on, and while all of that was happening, Oda worked his main force around into a good spot to do lead a strategic charge. Luckily for Oda, the weather was also on his side. Just as he was about to lead the charge, a really big thunderstorm hit, which really dropped visibility, obviously, and really added to the whole atmosphere of confusion in the Imagawa camp. Being poorly led, without a very strong military leader, discipline was quite weak in the camp, and Oda was able to take advantage of all of this. He led a charge with his much smaller force, but was able to cut through the enemy very quickly, get to the Imagawa camp, and then cut off, Yoshimoto Imagawa's head. So that was the end of that. That was the end of the Battle of Okizahama, and that was the start of Nobunaga Oda's superiority. He didn't lose many people. He managed to keep his military strength together. He beat a much larger force, which certainly put him on the map as far as the other generals in the vicinity were concerned. He managed to break down that alliance between the Hojo, Imagawa, and Takeda in one very swift blow. And on top of all of that, he managed to get the respect of Ieyasu Tokugawa. Now, in the battle that you're watching here, that I'm playing in front of you, Tokugawa doesn't participate in it because he was, in the real history, he was actually off capturing other castles, or sitting in a castle he had actually just recently captured. And that's reflected in this game. As you'll see, I'm about to kill Yoshimoto Imagawa, but that's actually only the midway point of the battle. The game then asks you to then go and finish the battle by beating the real leader, the real strategic genius at the time, Ieyasu Tokugawa, and capturing his fort. Now, that didn't happen in the real history. Nobunaga Oda didn't actually go and physically fight with Ieyasu Tokugawa. But it's important, I think, for the game developers, and it's really clever of the game developers to reflect the fact that, as powerful as Imagawa was, and the fact that he was the one who led the attack, he ultimately wasn't the driving force about what made Okizahama such an important battle for the future of Japan. He died quickly, and it was really just a stepping stone for Oda into ascendancy, and the real force, the real person that Oda needed to contend with was Yasu Tokugawa. Now, Oda did that diplomatically by making an ally of Tokugawa rather than military, through his military might, but symbolically the game does a really good job of really reflecting that, you know, for all of the size of the Imagawa force, it was really Tokugawa who drove things, and was really the future of that area of Japan. So that's basically how the battle went. It was a short battle. It wasn't, in terms of deaths, it certainly wasn't the biggest battle in Japan. It was a battle that just let Oda display his tactical genius. And I think, while it was obviously good for Oda and his forces and his people, Oda was definitely not the kind of person that Yoshimoto Imagawa was. He was not a generous man. He was not a forgiving man. He was, like I said at the very start of the video, he was a bit of a tyrant, and he was very harsh, and that was ultimately what led to some of his forces rebelling and betraying him. And what you would have seen in this video was some footage of one of his allies being a woman by the name of Wichi. Wichi was actually Nobunaga Oda's sister, and he married her off to one of his future allies. And then when his ally then betrayed him, what he did to that ally was really brutal, and that was kind of the beginning of the end. That was when the seeds of discontent amongst his forces were really sown, and he did that despite, you know, his sister actually being in the castle with her husband at the time. So he was definitely not, he was a single-minded, very ambitious person and was not pleasant to deal with, but he did have some great tactical ideas, and his greatest ability was to, aside from the people that rebelled against him, he also brought on an awful lot of very high talent generals like Yasu Tokugawa, and they helped him firstly capture as much land as he was able to, and then afterwards they were able to bring stability into the land from the position of power that he put them in. So he's a very important tactical and strategic leader, and a fascinating start to the battle for him. That's why he's portrayed as so demonic in just about every game that he appears in. He's always got the kind of the Darth Vader look, the glowing sword, which is purple because that's sinister. He's definitely not a good person, but he's not. But you got to respect his genius, I guess, is what I'm saying. And that's basically the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. I do enjoy creating these. I'll create some more soon, I'm sure. In the meantime, enjoy this one, and we will see you again soon.